everyone. Comic legend Todd McFarlane is either knowingly or unknowingly making the rounds on social media. He is being identified as uh, being attributed to the quote that you see on the screen. And I'm not really sure where the origin of this quote is, but it's causing a lot of discussion. So I want to continue that discussion. I think the quote might have come from an AMC documentary, Robert Kirkman's Secret History of Comics. Episode 3 talks about the Image story. This is in it's like 2017, 2016, 2017. But in the interview, I think McFarlane is going through the age-old argument of artist versus writer. It's a debate that started in the early 90s, and he was attributed to a sort of quote that I think goes something like, "I'm just here to say that if you think Michelangelo could do your artwork and you let my mom or my dog write it, that book will way, way, way outsell a book that is written by Shakespeare in which you let my mom or dog draw it." So basically implying that art is what carries the weight and not writing. So let's talk a little bit about Todd McFarlane. Really, really revolutionized art in many ways. So I give him credit for that. He was known for up in the ante on Spider-Man's look and did help boost sales with his artwork. He co-created the iconic villain Venom, smashed sales records. 1992, he and Rob Liefeld, Jim Lee all realized they were the moneymakers at Marvel, broke away, founded their own independent company called Image Comics. And the whole shtick of Image Comics was to champion creators' rights. You create it, you own it. Really shook up the entire comic book industry. Within Image Comics imprint, he launched Spawn. I remember the day it came out. It blew my mind in terms of its look and feel, and just the idea that I could create something on my own and make a comic of it, and that it could be successful. Todd and Rob and the founding Image fathers made a lot of money. So I think Spawn's gone on to be one of the longest running independent superhero series in history. He's still in charge of it. I don't know that he touches every issue. He's had multiple writers and artists throughout time. And so he's gone on to do bigger and greater things. The industry, like an industry entrepreneur, he founded McFarlane Toys, which really has set a new standard for hyper detailed action figures and collectibles, and are probably one of the top toy lines, I think. I'm not a big toy person, but so I can sell a book that is drawn by Michelangelo and written by my dog, but what I can't do is sell a book that is written by William Shakespeare and drawn by my mom. This is totally a classic Toddism. You see here is a picture of him in the 90s on the left. He's debating Peter David at a convention wearing his underwear. He would often be, and still is, very provocative, blunt, and Peter David's a writer that was very well respected in the industry, and they had a long-standing rivalry, and Todd would often go through very extreme antics to make his point and to be seen for his arguments. So, is he right? Yeah, I mean, a flashy cover definitely, gets a book into a customer's hands. So he is right about that. Um, I think what Todd's talking about though is a transaction, but I want to talk about art. Todd wants to sell units, and I want to talk about creating a legacy. So, two very different things. So, if he's right or wrong, kind of depends on what kind of answer you're looking for. So, for me, if comics are just about the look, we're not making books, we're just making prints, posters, gallery work. If you want to know why some comics are forgotten in the dollar bin while others are studied in universities, I think you have to kind of take a little bit deeper dive. So let's jump into the philosophy of what comics are. Will Eisner is the man who just literally pioneered the term graphic novel, really to define a deeper respect for the medium of comics. Comics are generally seen as some kind of superhero thing and cartoony thing to the general public. Um, I have long combated that notion myself, and that superhero comics are a genre. The medium of comics, i.e., graphic novels, are a type of artwork that Will really helped coin the term of, as well as sequential art. He didn't say cool drawings. He argued that much of the magic of comics happens in the gutters, the space between the panels, where the reader's mind connects the images to create a story. So for him, the art form was highly defined by being a story driven medium. You've got to really know how to deliver a sequential narrative, to pull plot threads along in a way that you are engaging with the audience. There's a quote where he's famous for saying, the writer must be a dramatist and the artist must be a director. When the writing in that case is, quote, written by a dog, in my view, the sequence breaks, the pacing dies. Art gets you the look, definitely, but storytelling really gets you to care, to invest. So for me, if Todd's art first philosophy was the ultimate truth, then the best of all time lists would be filled with Spawn or other pinup books, but they're not. So one of the more popular lists, I mean, you could go look on any list of whatever media you respect of the 100 best novels of all time, or etc. One of the long main standing ones is Time Magazine, whether you like Time Magazine or not, it's your cup of tea. But Time Magazine doesn't just look at prose in their 100 best novels. They look at the greatest stories of the century. So Alan Moore's Watchmen is one of those that has been put on a pedestal along with The Great Gatsby, 1984. And so they put it there because the writing was a ruthless deconstruction of power in humanity. It proved that a script could be just as complex as Steinbeck or Orwell. So in the eyes of history, for me, Shakespeare wins every time, because something like Watchmen, and although the artwork by Dave Gibbons is immensely powerful and beautiful, it was Alan Moore's ability to create the scaffolding and construct the way the artwork was able to execute itself that really makes Watchmen what it is, because it's also more than just a plot. It's the way he designed the visual portrayal of the entire book, down to color scheme, down to panel layout. And he did all of that himself. He really, if you look at the notes of Watchmen, Alan Moore's notes are notorious for being uber detailed, pages and pages long of notes for just even a single page of comic. So yeah, let's kind of take a look at other examples that I think kind of prove this point. So let's like look at the big mainstream uh, areas first. So Marvel Comics, one of the where Todd McFarlane got his start. Some prime examples of where the books themselves are known primarily for the story and are are milestones when people think of seminal books of the past, things that really stand out and stick out and made these books what they are. It's often referred to the writer in many cases, and not that the artists weren't identified and noted. They certainly are, and they are, in my eyes, really equal contributors. But when you think of Uncanny X-Men, you think Chris Claremont, his run, his 17-year, epic, highlighting and identifying topics like prejudice and identity. He he took a B-list book, despite the many beautiful artists that were a part of it, and he turned it into a global juggernaut with his writing. Peter David's Hulk, I actually picked an image here that is a McFarlane image because he worked on Hulk, and it's actually one of my favorite McFarlane images. I love that cover. Um, but Peter David spent over a decade on this book, deconstructing Bruce Banner's mind and exploring the tragedy of child abuse, and proved that the Hulk was more than just some brute power fantasy comic. It was high level psychological drama. So interesting that Peter David and McFarlane had such a rivalry, because the work that McFarlane did contribute to Peter David's run, I thought was pretty fantastic. And another Marvel book noted was Larry Hama, who basically wrote the entirety of the G.I. Joe series. When people think of G.I. Joe Marvel, they think Larry Hama, the writer. Incredible artists in this series. I mean, we're talking like Herb Trimpe, Rod Wingham, but Larry Hama was the mainstay. Larry Hama made this series what it was. If these series were just pretty pictures, without what these writers were able to contribute, they wouldn't have been as much of standouts as they are today. Kind of take a look at DC again, which was Watchmen. But I know it's a little controversial right now because Neil Gaiman's not doing great from what I can see in the news, but it's got to be noted that Sandman is one of those books that even didn't even have like the greatest art sometimes, but the writing is what made this book the modern myth that it is today. Grant Morrison's Animal Man, again, not a whole lot of great art at first, but Grant Morrison kind of took a forgotten character and wrote a metafictional journey about the nature of reality itself. So when people think of Animal Man, they think Grant Morrison. And Frank Miller, his Dark Knight Returns, it's kind of a back and forth thing. I mean, a lot of times Frank Miller is noted for his artwork, but what made Frank Miller stand out was his writing prowess as well. I think it's being kind of shown today and throughout Frank Miller's career. His writing began to wane, and his artwork hasn't been able to really carry his books and give them the weight that they did back then. So, and just to kind of stay on the DC tear, I think right now what we're experiencing with DC's Absolute Universe kind of hitting the forefront of the industry in the past couple of years. Titles like Scott Snyder's Absolute Batman aren't just selling, they're breaking the modern market right now. We're not just talking about successful launch. We're talking about a book and a series of books that are going through multiple lightning fast reprintings. So when a book hits its third, fourth, or fifth printing within weeks, that's not just eye-catching art at work. So as much as the artwork is great, but there are people being pulled back into collecting on a weekly basis that haven't been collecting before, and they're staying because of the recontextualization that Scott Snyder and the artist Dragotta and all the other people writing in the Absolute Universe are making of these characters. The market frenzy for those like consistent printings is basically the proof in the pudding. The audience doesn't just need quick, flashy art pieces. They need a structural reimagination or reimagining of a century-old myth that demands to be read and reread. And that's what we're seeing right now. So, long-standing books that have meat, that have a universe of characters that you can care about and you're excited to see what's going to happen next. This is what's happening literally right now in the industry. We can't forget about manga. I think manga is really probably the best example. The manga industry in Japan is bar none a million times more successful than the comics industry in America. And one of the things that makes them stand out is the long-standing series that they have what I'm trying to say is all of their series go on forever. People are constantly returning. So, sustainability is very important, and story and characterization is a huge pull. And I think One Punch Man is actually one of the best examples of this. Is the original webcomic featured art that was essentially a series of scribbles. So it's the living antithesis, really, of Mark McFarlane's theory. His aesthetic has the polish of a napkin doodle, but he's like one of the most successful creators on the planet. Not McFarlane, but One from One Punch Man. So, numerous examples can be pulled from manga. Just to kind of look at the indie comics industry as a whole, the Shakespeare and mom combo isn't just a theory. I think it's really a proven business model. These books don't have the hyper rendered muscles of 90s splash page, but nothing that you would really have as a poster on the wall. But they do have a permanent spot on the world's bookshelves. Art Spiegelman's Mouse is the first graphic novel to win a Pulitzer Prize. I mean, this is a book that is taught in colleges and universities, not just in America, but across the world. Spiegelman's art is scratchy, minimalist, underground. It doesn't aim for beauty, or aesthetics. It aims for truth. So it's a definitive proof to me that if your writing is profound, the art becomes a powerful focus lens for a narrative that changed the way the world views the truth that you're trying to convey, such as in this case, the Holocaust. Many other examples here, some of them with beautiful art, like of course Jeff Smith's Bone. But I mean, that's a Lord of the Rings epic. I mean, anybody who's read Bone knows that the writing chops are just as equal an equal standing of Smith's cartooning, if not more so. Persepolis, Harvey Picard's American Splendor, and multiple cartoonists contribute to American Splendor. Some of them really not that great, often grimy and unclean, art reflecting Picard's like mundane reality of his life. But American Splendor is noted for its writing. It's totally Picard's words that carry it. But again, so many examples we could go through: Hellboy Saga, Fun Home, all great artwork. I mean, I like all the artwork. I wouldn't disparage any of this artwork, but it's not flashy a lot of the times. It's there to really tell the story. I think all of the artwork that's exampled here is stuff that isn't there for the splash page, like a lot of like Todd McFarlane's work and other artists that herald from the 90s era, and even some today. But all of the art here is really leaning on that ability to be able to convey a narrative, for sure. So Todd, built an empire on the power of image, and not just image with a capital I, but a lowercase I. He's describing a product, but Will Eisner was describing a language. Another hero of mine, Scott McCloud. Really, I think McCloud is one of the best comic writers and artists alive today. It's kind of been noted as the Aristotle of comics. But in his book, Understanding Comics, he really lays out the way comics are read, absorbed. And I think that with his work, we find some of the technical refutations of Todd's kind of Michelangelo obsession. McCloud's core tenet of amplification through simplification. It argues that by stripping an image down to its essential meaning, an artist can sort of amplify that meaning in a way realistic art can't. So a quote mom drawn or dog drawn comic can actually be more universally relatable and effective than a hyper detailed masterpiece if the storytelling is sound. McCloud also states that successful comics rely on 5 core choices: moment, frame, image, word, and flow. These are tools of a writer, not the pinup artist. They're what ensure a reader really actually remains emotionally invested into what they're reading. I think, a comic is like a marriage. In a great marriage, you don't just fall for the looks, you fall for the conversation, right? It's a long-standing relationship, just as you would with any book. A comic is a book. So just like with a book, the cover is there and it draws the eye, but whether or not a person's going to stay with it and then end up buying the whole series, the content of the book has got to deliver. So when we look at the greatest of all time, quote unquote, the ones on the Time 100 list, the books that are in the Library of Commerce, and just like DC's absolute titles that are sending comic shops into a frenzy right now, we're not talking about books that had the quote cleanest lines or the biggest muscles or what have you. We're talking about the Shakespeare stories, to use Todd's nomenclature. We're talking about the books where the writing was so powerful it turned simple art into something iconic. So, sorry, Todd. I love the stuff that you've done, but I just can't be with you in this. Michelangelo can draw the cover, but if the dog writes a script, the book is over by the first page turn for me. So I'll take the story that moves me, even if it's drawn by mom. So At the end of the day, I still think I'm not looking at a comic. I'm I'm investing in a relationship. I'm investing in soul. I'm investing in art with a capital A, um, not just visual art, the art of delivering a story, a sequential art, of creating a legacy. So that's my response to Todd McFarlane. Thank you.